And true regulation, true healing, I don't think comes from constantly fixing yourself. I believe it comes from expanding your capacity to be with yourself, even when things aren't perfect. Welcome to Intuition Unlocked, the podcast for women who feel overwhelmed, disconnected, or like the version of themselves they're living no longer fits. This space empowers you to trust your intuition, restore inner and outer coherence, and reclaim self-trust so you can show up more clear, bold, and self-led in your life. I'm your host, Olivia Ashley, and I'm so glad you're here. Hello, friends, and welcome to Intuition Unlocked. I'm so happy to have you here today because what I'm going to talk about is something that can feel a bit nuanced and maybe even confronting, hopefully in a gentle way, and that is the idea that you don't need to heal everything to move forward. Because I think so many of us have been living inside this subtle belief that before we can really live our lives, before we can feel content, grounded, confident, at peace, we need to fix everything. We need to heal the wounds, regulate the nervous system, process the trauma, figure out our patterns, and become the healed version of ourselves. And only then, when we've completed all those things, will we be ready and can really begin. And it's not that those things are not important. I honestly talk about all of them here on my podcast. But what I've been seeing both in myself and other women is that this hyper focus can very quickly become a loop of constantly trying to get somewhere internally before we allow ourselves to actually be in our lives. So in this episode, we're going to talk about why the modern healing journey can quietly turn into another form of pressure and self-abandonment, how the nervous system and psychology play into this, I need to fix myself first pattern, what real healing looks like beyond the trends, tools, and constant seeking, and how to move forward in your life while still being a human who is imperfect, evolving, and sometimes in the messy middle. Because the truth is, healing is not meant to become your entire identity. And if it has, you're not alone. Many of us are in that state. So let's get into it and unpack this. I want to start us off by saying something really clearly, that there is nothing wrong with wanting to heal. There is nothing wrong with tending to your body, your emotions, your nervous system, your patterns, and your wounds. That is such meaningful work. It is sacred work, and it is important work. But there's something that I've noticed, both personally and collectively, is that the healing journey can very easily become another place where you hide. Another place where you postpone, another place where you say, I'll move forward when I feel better. I'll go after that when I'm more regulated. I'll show up more fully when I've healed this part of me, and I'll finally be okay when I just figure this out. And there is truth within those statements that it will feel better to go after things when you feel more regulated, or you will show up more fully when you've healed certain parts of yourself. But there's something underneath this that's even deeper sitting within that. There's this message of, I'm not safe to be fully in my life as I am right now. That there is something that needs to be fixed, changed, altered, transformed to be safe to be here, to be me. And that's where I think things start to get sticky because healing becomes a gatekeeper of your life. You're always almost there, almost ready, almost whole, almost able to trust yourself, but never quite enough to actually be here, present, fully living, and content with living in this space, in this body, here and now. And I've been here. I'm currently here, which is why I'm bringing this up because I had this big realization that when we are constantly scanning ourselves for what's still unhealed, still triggering, what's still not right or needs work, and the why behind it all, it creates this subtle hyper-awareness that disconnects you from your actual life. Because when you're in this state, you're no longer fully in you. You're being an observer to yourself in your life, and you're trying to fix your way into feeling okay. So let's talk about why this can happen. There's many reasons for it, but on a psychological and nervous system level, it often makes a lot of sense that we fall into these traps. Because if at some point in your life you were ever taught or learned that something was wrong with you, you were too much or not enough, that you needed to improve something or change something to be loved or safe, or your emotions were overwhelming or unsafe, then your system is primed to orient toward fixing, toward control and self-monitoring, and toward trying to get it right so you can feel safe. And healing work can sometimes reinforce this unintentionally because it gives language and frameworks to what's happening internally, and that feels often very good. And not only is this rooted in things that we might have learned or been conditioned in, it is also deeply ingrained in our culture and society as consumerists and within the health and wellness sphere that is becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry at this time. And I'm the first to say that a lot of us do need healing. A lot of us do need help and nervous system regulation and support for our trauma and our patterns and our conditioning. But there's something I'm witnessing here where we're starting to outsource our truth, outsource all of our issues to others, to products, to people in effort to heal ourselves and to make us feel better and to get rid of the discomfort we're feeling. But when we start to outsource our healing to others, to fix our problems, to take away the discomfort, to give us the blueprint that's going to change your life, I think when we're not careful, this act creates a lens where everything becomes something to fix, and usually from something outside of yourself. Both your perspective and your paradigm becomes hypervigilant around anything that isn't quite right. So every emotion becomes a problem when it's not positive or feels good. Every trigger becomes something to resolve immediately so you can get rid of the discomfort. And every discomfort becomes evidence that something's wrong. And your nervous system starts to live in a constant loop of scan, analyze, fix, repeat. And I don't think that actually creates safety. It creates vigilance. And true regulation, true healing, I don't think comes from constantly fixing yourself. I believe it comes from expanding your capacity to be with yourself, even when things aren't perfect. I want to go back to the cultural layer here because we are living in a time where healing has become an industry. Like I said, a multi-billion-dollar industry. We are the consumers and the industry has a solution. And some of them are amazing. Some of them are truly helping. But there's a lot of noise in this space right now because there is always a new modality, a new protocol, a new diet, supplement, mindset shift, and a new this will change everything for you thing. And none of that is inherently bad. There's so many beautiful tools, resources, technology, and people doing things that are really helping. But there is a shadow side of this that can keep us in a constant state of seeking the next thing to feel better. The next fix, supplement, breakthrough, tool, identity, the next product or workshop or program. And all that noise starts to subtly reinforce the belief within yourself that where I am right now is not enough. And I need something outside of me to finally be okay. And that is a very disempowering place to live because it creates a kind of dependency where healing is no longer about coming home to yourself, to finding coherence within your body and your life. It becomes about constantly searching for what's missing to fix the parts of you that are uncomfortable. And I'm not necessarily talking about healing that needs to happen around diseases or chronic issues. I'm talking more around the mind, body, spirit type sphere that we are all very aware of and seeing right now. Because there is a space where you do need help to heal. So make sure you're working with practitioners and doctors and your trusted folks to help you where you need it. But what I'm talking about is this healing that has become so ubiquitous in our day-to-day life, in our yoga classes, along our Instagram feeds, in the stores, where everything is trying to grab your attention and sell you its fix. And again, some of it will work, some of it won't, but there's something much deeper underneath it all. Because if we can reclaim healing and remember that it's actually not about fixing everything, then we can remember that real healing is much simpler and much deeper and inherent to ourselves than we've made it. Healing is not the absence of triggers or discomfort or hard seasons and imperfections. I believe healing is your ability to stay in relationship with yourself and your life, even when all those things like discomfort, like imperfection and triggers are present. Healing is your ability to feel something and not make it mean everything is wrong. It's your ability to move forward while still being in process, to hold both the hard and the good at the same time, and to trust yourself even when you don't feel perfect. And that's where I think we've gotten a little lost, because we've equated healing with feeling good all the time. And when we don't, which is pretty often in this world, we immediately start to spiral or crumble or worry and start to seek out the next right thing to heal us. But that's not life. And when we chase that feeling, we actually become less capable of being human. We lose our ability to be in the gray, to hold complexity, and to trust ourselves through change, and true, uncomfortable, alchemical change that we will all go through time and time again. And this is where intuition becomes incredibly important, because when you're stuck in a loop of fixing, analyzing, and seeking, you start to lose connection to your own inner knowing, because your attention is always outwards, always seeking. You're asking outside of yourself, what should I do? What's the right way? What is missing? What do I need? But intuition doesn't live out there. It lives in here, in your body, in this moment, in the quiet spaciousness of life. That's where the subtle knowing comes forward. And often intuition is not telling you to do more. It's telling you to come back. Come back to yourself, to your breath, to what's here and what matters and what's in your body and yourself that can tell you what is wrong, that can help you heal and feel more at peace with whatever it is that you're moving through. And sometimes I think the most intuitive thing you can do when you're in a state of feeling discomfort, of scatteredness, of struggle, is to not add another practice, product, or program, but to remove the excess noise, the excess pressure, the constant fixing or scrolling, so you can return to the simplicity and to the truth of where you are without all that external input, to who you are. And from that space, you are ready to ask yourself, what actually feels true for me right now? And that question alone can begin to shift everything, to help you reclaim that power and that insight. And so what does this actually look like to live this way, to move forward without needing to be fully healed first? I think it looks like allowing two things to be true at once, where I am still healing and I am still living. I am still evolving and I can still trust myself. I still have patterns that come up and I can be present in them and still move forward even with them. I can still have hard days and my life is still mine to be in. This is where self-trust deepens, not because everything becomes resolved, but you stop abandoning yourself every time something isn't. And this is something I've had to learn time and time again in my own life, because there were seasons where I felt so focused on what wasn't okay internally that I couldn't help myself but search externally for answers, to feel like if I just did this next thing or learned this next thing or did this new practice, all was going to be okay. I was so hyper-focused on feeling better and figuring it out and getting to the other side, and I was in this massively anxious, spiraling state that I missed the fact that I was already in my life being okay. That this hyper-focus was actually leading me to the spiraling and looking for external band-aids to shift something that actually started within me. But I was struggling to get quiet. I was struggling to honor my own intuitive language and my own body's wisdom that already was holding the answers, because I already honestly had the messages and the knowing of what needed to change or what I needed to adjust. And that was up to me. I didn't need anyone else for that. And that's where the shift happens. And I think this shift is coming forward now too, because I truly believe we are moving into a new paradigm when it comes to healing, where it's less about fixing and optimizing and eliminating discomfort and living forever, and more about capacity, relationship, presence, coherence, reciprocity, and self-trust. A paradigm where healing is not something we chase, but it's something that naturally unfolds as we live. As each of us show up in our days, make decisions, stay with ourselves in the hard times, allowing life to shape us, and where we connect to ourselves, to life, the land, the beings all around us, and our community more deeply, and where we find our rooted roles in this life. From that space, healing is integrated in our livelihood, and it's not performative or something to create a commodity out of, and it doesn't get wrapped up in our identity or something we have to prove that we're doing. Healing becomes a natural part of being human because we remember that life is sporadic, that we move through seasons of grief, of death, and then through rebirth and growth and blooming. And it's all part of this purpose, that there is a place and a space for all of this to come forward. Whereas a society, we become very in tune with our emotions, with our bodies, with our intuition, where we connect to frequency and energy and the world around us in a way that supports all of us, where we freely can talk about the hard things, where we can be vulnerable and feel our feelings and not feel like we have to hide them or be too much because we feel the way we feel. We move from being something that has to be perfect, and we shift out of keeping up with each other or putting one another above or below each other, and we return back to a circle, back to a space where we tend and we nourish and we remember and we commune. That is healing. That is where healing comes from. That is the beginning of a renaissance, of a shift in our reality. If you too have been feeling like you need to fix everything before you can be in your life, before you can trust yourself, and before you can move forward, I want to offer this as another way, because you don't. You don't need to heal everything to start living your life. You don't need to be perfect to trust yourself and your intuition. And you don't need to resolve every pattern before you are worthy to create, to move forward, to feel good. You are allowed to be in process and in your life at the same time. And maybe the real question is not, what do I still need to fix to be more me? But what would it look like to be here in my life as I am? And trust that I can meet whatever arises along the way. Because that state is where real healing begins. So thank you so much for being here with me today. If this episode resonated, I'd love for you to share it or send it to someone who might need this reminder right now. And if you want to journal on something after this episode, you can sit with this question: where have I been waiting to feel better before allowing myself to fully live? I love you, I'm grateful for you, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for being here today. I am truly grateful you chose to spend this time with me and be a part of this community. If this episode resonated, I'd love for you to leave a rating and written review because it helps Intuition Unlocked reach more women who are ready to live clearer, bolder, and more self-led. As a thank you, screenshot your review and email it to me, and I'll send you a resource to support your next step. And until next time, root into your truth, rise into your power, and radiate your light.